Good morning and afternoon and evening, everyone. I'm so glad to moderate this session and to share information about PPTA's partnership with the team at MWW to launch the Defy the Odds campaign. I'm joined today by a few members of the team and look forward to an engaging and informative discussion about the genesis of the campaign, the implementation and launch this past June, and how the outcomes are progressing so far. But first, I'd like to take a few minutes just to highlight some of PPTA's activities over the past year as we work to share our messages, raise awareness, and support our colleagues, members, and patient advocates in their respective work. I'll first describe some of the work we conducted in 2020 and how that research informed an awareness campaign that our team ran, as well as some of the key learnings. And then I'll touch on websites we launched this year to support our EU and North America advocacy. And then I'll share some of our work and outcomes from this year's International Plasma Awareness Week, which ran the first week of October. During the early height of the pandemic, we worked with a market research firm to help identify specific audiences who we felt would be most receptive to messages regarding plasma, plasma protein therapies, and the importance of plasma donation. Based on the outcomes of that research, we designed a social media campaign via Facebook and Instagram to target audiences who we felt were most likely to respond favorably to messages about donation. We focused on people based on age and attitudes determined by the research findings, all of whom lived within 10 to 15 miles of donation centers in Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio. And via their existing activity and likes on Facebook and Instagram, made them more likely to see and respond to our messages. Over the course of the 7-month project, we saw that social media users are interested in messages about plasma donation and are quite likely to follow our general calls to action to learn more and to visit Find a Donation Center on donatingplasma.org. We produced a webinar earlier this year to walk through the full findings of our campaign, and that webinar is available on demand via the GPS platform. I encourage everybody to watch that and learn more. Ultimately, we were very pleased with the outcomes, and we continue to adapt what we learned and include the findings in our current projects to reach more plasma donors. We're already discussing ways we can continue utilizing the campaign's lessons in future projects to increase awareness of plasma donation and the urgent need for plasma donors. New this year, we launched the it'sinasalltosavealife.org website to support our advocacy and communications efforts in the EU. This site is now available in 12 languages, and the end goal is for web visitors to sign the call for support, indicating their agreement that Europe needs to do more to collect plasma. The site is the home of much of our EU-focused advocacy and communications work, including content partnerships with Politico and Euractiv, two widely read news sources in the EU. It's also the site we most often direct our social media users to as part of the PPTA Europe Facebook and Twitter channels. If anybody does not already follow PPTA Europe on Facebook and Twitter, I would encourage you to do so. It's in us all to save a life is the brand and tagline most frequently in the EU when engaging with media and in the 4-part video series we're creating. You saw one of those videos during the opening address with Amy and Paul a few minutes ago, and we look forward to sharing more videos soon. To date, we have more than 100 signatories of our call for support, including patients, donors, medical professionals, national and international patient advocacy groups, and members of the European Parliament. Also new this year, we launched uniquelysavinglives.org to support our US federal and state advocacy work. Although the pandemic was the primary catalyst to us moving our existing folders to a web format, we realized that we're all living in a more connected world than ever before. Transitioning the content of our folders to an online version allows our government affairs colleagues, as well as our members and patient advocates, to draw from and use the content as needed. And of course, will make it much easier to update the material as needed without resorting to printing and reprinting the traditional folder content. We recognized the 9th annual International Plasma Awareness Week last month, And I want to take a couple minutes to highlight some of our activities and to thank the patient advocate community, as well as PPTA members for all they did to utilize the occurrence of IPAW to build awareness of the need for plasma donation. We distributed press releases promoting IPAW to media outlets in the DC metro area, as well as to reporters in Austria, Belgium, the Czech Republic, Germany, Hungary, and Poland. Specific calls to action directed readers to visit donatingplasma.org, it'sinasalltosavealife.org, or howisyourday.org to learn more about plasma donation, and where to donate. As we've done for several years, we reached out to governors' offices across the US seeking support for proclamations recognizing IPAW. This year, we secured 41 proclamations, which was a significant increase over last year. We know that our ongoing outreach to state houses across the country and the resounding support we get for IPAW really shows an increase in awareness and support for our issues and for plasma. Also, we took our learnings from our audience segmentation work earlier this year to create a range of ads on Facebook and Instagram. We targeted social media users in the capital cities of EU countries where PPTA member companies operate, as well as the Washington, DC metro area and Warsaw, Poland, to continue raising awareness of donation there. We also pushed ads in Brussels and Strasbourg to increase our chances of directly reaching MEPs. The European Parliament was in Strasbourg the week of IPAW, so we wanted to hit both cities. We are pleased to see great engagement and response to our various ads, as well as enormous increases in visits to the Find a Donation Center page on donatingplasma.org and to the page on It's in Us All to Save a Life, where visitors could sign the call for support, indicating their agreement that Europe needs to do more to collect more plasma. PPTA member companies, patient advocates, US officials, and members of parliament were instrumental in promoting this year's IPAW messages, with many of them sharing and retweeting our material, as well as taking the time to create their own content. And finally, we partnered with politico.eu to publish some sponsored content, particularly via a homepage takeover of the Politico site throughout IPAW. The messages and graphics were seen nearly 520,000 times, significantly increasing awareness of the It's in Us All to Save a Life site, the campaign, and the call for support. Our evolving messages and campaigns verify that there is a thirst for knowledge about plasma donors, and the patients who rely on plasma-derived therapies. We know that when we craft targeted messages to specific audiences and back it up with data and analysis, our learning becomes iterative, and each successive campaign, each ad, each call to action, all become more effective and more efficient. We're all looking forward to continuing this work in the EU, in the US, and globally to promote plasma and plasma donation for patients around the world. So thank you for your time. I just wanted to take a few minutes to offer some highlights about what PPTA has been doing internally here with the staff and with our members. I'm now particularly excited to introduce some of the team we've been working with closely for more than a year on an ambitious program here in the US to raise awareness of plasma. I'm very glad to introduce Michelle Rios, Shelley Noeldechen, and Parker Ray, all from MWW. We will first hear from Michelle about the genesis of the work, and then Shelley will offer some highlights about about what we've created throughout the campaign, and Parker will then dive into the data and analytics we've seen so far. We intend for this to be more of a conversation, so I invite GPS attendees to post questions in the comment box, and we'll get to as many of them as we can in the time allotted. So thank you very much, and Michelle, I'd like to turn the virtual stage over to you.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone this morning. And as we queue up the next segment of our presentation, let me just start by saying our work with PPTA really started about 18 months ago. And it was predicated on the fact that, we can go ahead to the next slide, please, that we recognized in the PPTA members and the board of directors, communications teams recognized that there was a dire situation up front in the middle of 2020 at the height of the pandemic. Donations were down. People were mostly staying home. Some of the usual donors were not turning out for donation, and there needed to be something different. They knew that they needed to up their game. As Matt said, there was a lot of activity already happening. The PPTA does a wonderful job at messaging and supporting the membership, but they needed to do something different. And that's where we were able to enter the conversation. So over the summer of 2020, we worked very closely with the PPTA leadership and the Global Board of Directors to talk about how do we do that. And essentially where we netted is that for the first time, we needed to start a movement. We needed to have a national conversation around plasma, much in the way we've already had historically and for some time now on blood donation. There wasn't enough understanding or visibility for plasma nationally, and that we needed to really educate Americans on the value and the importance of plasma donation. So when we thought about our campaign and how we could go about this, we knew a couple of things were going to be essential. Some of the principles that were guiding our campaign development. We knew that raising awareness and education were going to be the foundation and cornerstone. So what is plasma? How is it used? Why is it important? We're going to be important parts of the conversation, creating a unified and consistent narrative that everyone could coalesce around, regardless of where they were in the PPTA family, was going to be important. Driving that home, and very importantly, taking the tone of communications from what had been predominantly a transactional conversation to more of an emotional play. And we'll talk more about that over the course of this morning, was going to be key. Increasing awareness for an interest of potential donors in what we identified as 5 key markets. Matt mentioned 3 of the 5 key markets that our campaign ultimately has been focused on. So Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Texas, and Florida is where our campaign is currently running. And we knew that it was going to be very important that we target those very, very focused in a focused way, but that we also wanted to go beyond what our traditional donor profile looked like, which skewed more young and more male, more urbanite, more around college towns, to a much broader donor profile so that we could increase that base over time. We knew this was not going to be a flip the switch sort of situation. So this campaign was going to start as a pilot program, which it has, and it has been running now for 7 months. And what we recognized was that audiences predominantly now, as we have all experienced, are online, right? That we're predominantly in social channels, that a lot of our knowledge and information gathering happens on our mobile devices, on our computers and laptops, and that's where our campaign needed to focus. And so to streamline our efforts, to really hone in on, we looked at how do we develop a integrated campaign where we took all of our learnings from our research. We can go ahead to the next slide, Brendan, thank you, and create a very integrated approach to bringing this education and information awareness to these target audiences in our 5 pilot program markets. So at the center of this campaign was of our Defy the Odds campaign was givingplasma.org, our microsite, where you could learn more about plasma, what it's used for, how to donate, where to find a donation center closest to you, a very important interactive tool. So using own channels, using shared channels, and boosted advertising, paid media, and a bit of earned, we've created this integrated campaign to drive our target audiences in those pilot program markets to the website to learn more. It's a very streamlined site. If you haven't been to it yet, I really highly encourage you to go to it, givingplasma.org. Again, the idea behind it was raise awareness, help people, really arm them with the information they need to understand the process for donation and where to learn more about how to go about donating, and quickly identify the nearest donation center to them. Let's go ahead. In a very quick synopsis here, we actually started the conversations over the summer of 2020 with PPTA. Our research got underway in full swing just about a year ago. We started with focus groups and a quantitative survey. The idea behind those is all of our campaign is driven by insights. Shelley's going to delve into that in a moment, but we wanted to make sure that what we thought would help drive people to learn more and to consider donating was really predicated on insights of what's happening in the market. So those focus groups became incredibly important, and our national quantitative survey were very informative on what messages were going to be the most emotive and most compelling to our target audience. Once the research phase concluded, we went into blown production, and we were developing assets, messages. The creation of our microsite all happened over the course of last spring. We were fully live and in our pilot market at the start of June of this year, and we've been running this campaign day in and day out since then. As I mentioned, this pilot program, which started in June, is currently going on. We'll keep going. Right now, we're in this place where we're assessing what worked. We're constantly looking at optimizing, refreshing content, creative, looking at making sure our messaging is reaching folks in our social channels appropriately through our served up ads to drive folks to the microsite. We're constantly tweaking. Matt also mentioned iPod. We had a mini campaign around iPod at the beginning of October. We experimented with some earned as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about some sponsorships that we've been dabbling with to increase and boost awareness through the campaign. The idea is that we are constantly moving forward. As I mentioned, the campaign is not a one and done. This takes time. Movements, national conversations don't happen in the course of one day. They're cumulative, they're over time. We're building a strong foundation as we embark on 2022 with the lessons of the last several months. We're very excited to really help to increase that awareness in these key markets even more, to really drive our overall understanding of plasma collectively on behalf of the organization within those markets, and hopefully over time expand the program. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Shelley. She's going to tell you a little bit more about how we came up with the Defy the Odds campaign. And again, it really started with our research endeavors and the insights that the data provided. Shelley?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. So really the name of the game here, as we start to dive into a little bit more of the details around each of the channels that Michelle just walked you through, the name of the game in everything that we do is all about how do we powerfully leverage data and insights to always be creating efficiencies, always be getting smarter about what we're putting out there, whether it's a creative look and feel, a message, an audience that we may target, dial up or down on the page to go after specific regions, geographies, audiences, because they're responding better. So everything that we do from launch, even pre-launch, and every time we're out there refreshing our creative and our messaging is all about what the data is telling us. And so as Michelle talked you through, at the very beginning, we actually started with focus groups. So instead of going out to market right away and starting to eat away at that paid spend, we actually did some very targeted creative messaging testing to focus groups that were donor profiles that matched the types of audiences that we knew we were going to want to get. And so we actually launched with 3 different concepts or thematics. As you can see there, that little mix on the left of the slide. Those 3 actually went through a couple rounds of testing. We were given a lot of really, really wonderful, meaty insights, even in that pre-phase before we were out spending any money in the market. And what it did was give us a very clear direction of what was going to resonate and work with the audiences that we were targeting in order to get the results that we want. So before we even went to market, we had a very clear idea. And that's how we got to the Defy the Odds. So we tested a couple of different thematics, Defy the Odds, that idea of Numbers really resonated with people. In general, we were doing some comparison messaging in terms of odds and numbers. And that really tested just far and above the other two concepts that we went through those focus groups with. So right away, a great direction, right? Something really, really smart we knew we were going to come out and hit the market with. And then when we look at all of the different sort of, we call paid pulses, when we talk about display ads and, you know, paid placements and things like that, we want to do refreshes on a regular basis. So every time we enter into a refresh exercise, we're always looking back at what was performing the best, not just the time before, but all the times before. And it really starts to tell a comprehensive story over time. And whereas you might start with, okay, we know we were going to go out with the Defy the Odds concept, that's still a very wide net. You can talk about a lot of different things. There's different angles to approach the creative explorations and executions. And so as you know, we're doing a paid refresh each time, that is getting narrower and narrower, smarter and smarter. And you're going to see the results pay it all off. We know we're heading the right direction. And then, of course, always on social is constantly giving us this feedback on a regular basis of what kinds of messaging are resonating with our audiences, what kind of visuals even, you know, or is a photograph going to resonate better than an illustration? You know, does it depend on the message? How does the call to action change the way people act when they come and hit the website? And that sort of pull through in results. One really great thing about social is our ability to test topical interest. So, you know, we know from the focus groups at the start that people are very interested in those patient stories and especially different uses of plasma, though they might declare an awareness in general of plasma. A high percentage of people actually talked about with us in the focus groups that they didn't know what it was truly used for or were very vague on it. So social engagements helps us to help really understand the different uses of plasma, the different topics around plasma that are going to drive interest and get that engagement and ultimately drive conversions.
Great, and I'll take through the next 3 slides, paid, social, and influencer. So with paid, as Shelley mentioned, you saw in a very quick period of time, because we were using online programmatic paid social to put out this content. So you see it's a mix of content of actual people and stories, animations that we were able to test out and different messaging. You saw from June to September, a uptick in the click-through rate, but also a significant jump of 10 percentage points in the video and audio completion rate. And those videos were 15 and 30-second spots. So for anybody who's worked with video content, you know how significant a 70 and 80% completion rate really is. And so by the time we got to IPAW in October and we were seeing 87% completion rates and 25 or 0.25% click-through rates, you saw we're just seeing that these optimizations are kicking in very quickly. In the period that the campaign has been live, we've seen over 30 million impressions. This is reaching uniques in those 5 markets that Michelle mentioned earlier, but this is getting a frequency messaging out to these people because we know that frequency was going to be key. So each of these impressions is reaching, you know, surrounding certain people online. And this is a very holistic surround sound approach that we're doing through paid. And the other metric here, this almost 60% brand lift, so people likely to donate plasma after being exposed to this campaign. We did a study that showed this lift, which is also a very significant jump in a short period of time. So we're heading into 2022 with some great learnings and great results, but already hitting the ground running, as Shelley mentioned. In social, now this is a combination of organic, but a lot of it was also paid as well. We are reaching almost 14 million people in this time. And we were, the things we want to call out here are that social was a great place to kind of tell people's real stories. On Shelley's slide, you saw, and you'll see it on the next slide on Influencer 2, we had a lot of people comment and showing intent to go donate or asking for information, where we were able to actually engage with them in real time on social and provide them the link to the website and the donation locator. So social was a great way not to just get the message out and test messaging, but it became a critical channel for two-way dialogue with people in real time, and making sure that people were getting the information that they needed, not just raising awareness, but we were able to, in a quick period of time, take this from a reach and awareness campaign into a consideration and intent campaign through the website. And you'll see the engagement rate is significantly high as well. And while this is a roll up of video views, likes, comments, shares, and a variety of the engagements with the content, and we are currently digging in to kind of delineate that even further, that engagement rate is very high, and the CPM remains very much under our benchmark. So we're getting more bang for the buck as we're pushing this content out there and going through these optimizations. And then final slide before I hand it back over to Michelle. Influencer was another interesting test we were put in. We actually kicked off influencer with 2 influencers for IPAW. We've since done another influencer, and one of the influencers we've been working with is actually going to be doing some additional content for us before the end of the year. But what you see here as well is that influencer was able to create custom content, tell real people stories. The influencer stories were very much like they were donating for the first time. So really connected with a lot of people and told that unique story and that unique journey of people are like, you know what, I've heard about this, I haven't really thought about it, tell me more. And so the influencers are able to actually have that, again, that two-way dialogue with potential donors. The engagement rate was significantly high as well, over 3x what we were expecting from this type of campaign. And while the website views or visits, we are looking to get that up heading into 2022. We're actually getting some great, this is in the reach and awareness campaign. The other thing I want to point out here is, as you see on the side here, that these comments from people showing intent, showing consideration, talking about they've never donated but encouraged to do so now. So these are just a sampling of the comments that were coming through, not just on the influencer campaign, but also on the brand social content, which is very encouraging. And I'll pass it back to Michelle.
Thank you, Parker. So we've talked about the fact that our campaign centered around pilot markets, our 5 key markets of Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Texas, and Florida. But we wanted to make sure that ultimately we dabbled in how do we create more national reach. And we knew that it was going to mean going beyond our own channels and even some of our shared channels in social and in our advertising to look at sponsorships. How could sponsorships bring us some of that national feel? And so one of the very first sponsorships now that we've engaged in is one with USA Today. I'm sure you're all familiar with the publication. It has an incredibly large online presence as well. It reaches folks in our target markets, but of course, well beyond, across the country. And what we did is we've engaged in this fall in what is a 2-article series, and we'll look at how we work with them moving forward into 2022. But so far, we've had 1 article flight run. It just ended. It was October 4th through the 20th. And during that time, we had 1.4 million impressions, and our benchmark was 1.25. So we well exceeded that benchmark. The click-through rate was incredible, about double what we would expect, actually more than double than what we would expect, 0.23. Our attention time, which is the time they would actually spend and engage with the content, the article, learning more about plasma, learning more about somebody whose life has been transformed and saved as a result of plasma donation. 66 seconds, which in today's day and age, I think I'm sure you all know, you're bombarded with information. It's an incredible amount of time to dedicate toward reading something thoroughly and through. And then the scroll depth, we're getting over 54%, which is fantastic, well exceeding the benchmark. We have another article queued up to start later this week, actually, on the 18th. It'll run through the end of December. We expect these impressions to probably double. So 1.4 on this first run, probably even higher on the second run. Fantastic opportunity for us to help tell the story, help explain to people what plasma is used for, why it's so needed, and to, again, get this message out in a national way. This goes toward creating that national movement. So while we continue to cultivate our program in our key 5 target markets, we do want to make sure we're using those tools at our disposal within our parameters and budget to explore taking the conversation nationally. It's ultimately our goal. Create a national conversation, create a movement, and these types of sponsorships like USA Today help us go on that journey. I'm going to turn it back over to Shelley to walk us through really the hallmark of our campaign, which is givingplasma.org. So Shelley, take it away.
Thanks, Michelle. So yeah, as we saw at the very, very beginning, everything that we're doing as part of this campaign and all the different multi-channel efforts are all driving back to the website, givingplasma.org in some capacity. We may be driving to the homepage. We sometimes drive directly to the locator tool at the bottom of the homepage via an anchor link. We have different pages that have been designed to deliver very specific information and pull through that story that we begin telling in the paid and social channels on the website, so that when people click through, they're getting that feel of that complete pull through. They're not feeling jarred or that they've been driven to a place that doesn't match what brought them in. Oftentimes that includes driving directly from stories that are on social about a specific patient or donor to that story that's published in a slightly longer format on the site. But it also offers that ability to redirect them always to the donation tool lookup, because our ultimate goal is conversions, which on our site and through our campaign, we define as they have gone to that location tool. As you can see right there at the bottom center of the screen, it's that little map, very much mirrors the one on the main site, donatingplasma.org. So when they go there, when they click on the map to zoom in and click on any one of those donation centers, or if they enter their zip code and look up a donation center in their area, that registers for us as a conversion. And that really clearly does, shows the intent to donate in the sense that they've gone through that whole step of, let me find a center. And from there, they have to call the center or actually go in. So that's the farthest that we can track them through our campaign. But so that's what we're seeing as conversion and or demonstrating intent to donate. And so if we can pull them all the way through to that tool, that is the ultimate goal, of course. And so everything about this site is also built directly from feedback that we received in the focus groups. We actually did a line of questioning with our focus groups about what kind of information is the most important for you to see or understand or receive in order to get you to donate. We were given some very, very distinct 3 buckets. They want to know what plasma is used for. They want to know what the donation process looks like, and they want to know, is there a center near me? And so, you can see our homepage directly mirrors the tiered information that was given to us as, this is what I want to see in the focus groups. And the website really stays very streamlined in delivering that information. So we've made the donation process very graphic, very easy, very number driven for people to help understand. So you see that's the page to the right there, 900 donation centers, how you get through in a 3-step process. We want to make everything feel very understandable, clear, and easy to remove those barriers for entry and donation. We've driven to date about 60,000 people to the givingplasma.org. And really the core reason, other than that, distilling that information, making sure it carries that look and feel of the campaign. So when people are pulled through from channels, they don't feel like they've gone somewhere very different, which, you look at the donatingplasma.org has a little bit of a different look and feel, the PPTA more branded feel, but also specifically this microsite allows us to track the campaign progress. which is really important. So it would have been very hard to distinguish anyone that was pulled into the microsite or through this campaign if we had gone with, say, donatingplasma.org. And to separate those results would have been very difficult. So it's much more easy to track through a dedicated microsite that we know anybody that comes here really has seen our campaign in some capacity. There was also a question, I think, about the IPAW results. So what we can say is that October result that was 39% conversion, which was a little bit of a tick up, is mostly the result of the paid pushes around IPAW and directly after, but we really did do a concerted focus push during IPAW. So you do see a little bit of an increase right there in terms of donation, in terms of conversion, right? That intent to donate, which is what we can track. But overall, the website is doing incredibly well. Our conversion rate is averaging at 27% since the July launch, late June, July launch, with a couple of, with pretty much a clear rise, right, an increase over time. We did have a little bit of a time period where the tool was down just due to some web backend Google fun things, which attributes to the 33% in September, as opposed to it continuing to increase. But you can see it bounce right back as soon as we were going again, and that IPAW push brought us up to 39. So we're hoping to continue that increase, of course, in all of the efficiencies and those insights that we're getting from our data. So we can go to the next slide. Last but certainly not least is our membership toolkit. This has been an integral part of our campaign. So we publish regularly refreshes on the givingplasma.org site in order to allow members to access the content that we're using as part of the campaign. And we always invite them to share it across their channels, because every share out there, every eyeball out there is going to always help bolster the campaign as a whole, which again, right, is about plasma donation in general, really building that value. And getting more people to see and want to give it a try. And so, of course, any membership activity is going to help bolster that. And so here you can see sort of a smattering of some of the content that we've been putting over social, and the range of topics and ways that we are addressing the subject matter in order to get people in the door and on board. And that wraps us up. So we want to thank everybody for joining and how much we appreciate you giving us your time to walk you through the Defy the Odds and givingplasma.org.
Great. Thank you, Shelley and Michelle and Parker. Looks like we've got a few minutes for some questions, and I've been monitoring the questions as they come in. And there's actually some really interesting questions that folks are asking. So I definitely appreciate that. Excuse me. Just a couple quick clarifying questions. Somebody asked if we saw an increase in donations after the IPAW campaign. I think it's important to note that as an association, PPTA, our visibility of actual deltas in donations or information about actual donation numbers is always backward looking by a 3-month delay. So we don't see any changes in donations until 3 months after they have happened. So as I think we made clear during this entire presentation, that this is more of an ongoing conversation, an ongoing discussion about building awareness. So you're not going to see a change based on 1 week's of social media activity, but what we're hoping to see as the campaign progresses, as we look backwards, that we will be able to note any kind of change in donations. And we know that there are myriad variables that go into donations. So we're working internally to really identify how can we best ascribe changes in actual donations to the campaign, with the understanding, obviously, that this campaign's ultimate intent is to raise awareness, get people thinking about it, to show that there is an interest and an intent that will then help people be more receptive to messages that our individual member companies put out in their markets that are also helping to get people into the door. There was also just a real quick question between the difference between givingplasma.org and donatingplasma.org. So I want to just touch on that real quick. I think, Shelley, you said correctly that donatingplasma.org is PPTA's website. We've operated it for years. We know what the analytics are on the back end, but we needed to have a separate campaign home for the Defy the Odds campaign so that we know how to really describe any analytics that are associated with the campaign to this site. So it's really just a differentiator between the two. So I think I just mentioned, conversations and movement. So Michelle, in your presentation, or in your portion of the presentation, you talked about changing the conversation and create a movement. Can you just real quickly sort of repeat or what does it mean to create a movement? What is the goal there?
So I think what we were seeing from a historical perspective is that the activity from the member companies that are part of the PPTA is very local and regional. It's really about driving traffic into those donation centers. So the advertising, the ways that go about doing that has really been very much a local, as we would expect it to be. However, that capture doesn't take into an account the fact that there is, generally speaking, a very low level of awareness of what plasma is. So the recognition collectively was that this campaign would serve as an umbrella, if you will, to all the member companies' activities to help elevate the importance of plasma. So creating a national movement and a national conversation is sort of takes on a couple of different arenas. One, we needed to elevate the conversation beyond just foot traffic going into donation sites to talk about what plasma is and how it's used and why it's important. That's not the sort of thing that you hear on a day in, day out basis through the individual member company efforts in driving traffic to locations. So we wanted to step back and have this broader conversation to supplement and complement that work. Then we wanted to look for ways, and we continue to do this, and we'll be doing this throughout 2022 and beyond. How do we help do that on not just in our pilot markets that we're currently in, but beyond? So again, using compelling messages, using storytelling of actual patients that have received plasma donation, whose lives have been saved, whose lives have been transformed and enhanced, to help tell a much more emotional story than quite often what happens is for your plasma donation, you can receive a monetary compensation, right? So we wanted to change that, to not even get into that conversation, to really look at what are those stories that we could tell, and also how can we tell donor stories in a more compelling way and raise the whole national consciousness and the way we see other like blood donation, for example. So our goal ultimately is to really create a national conversation that not only brings more visibility to plasma, but also transforms the way the industry is viewed and respected in a variety of stakeholder audiences beyond just the average consumer, the average American, so that they understand that plasma, the uses of plasma, is really in the business of saving lives. That when you think about plasma, you think about saving lives.
Thank you very much. That's actually very helpful. And just a moment of housekeeping. If you have questions, please submit them into the Q&A function on the GPS platform so that we see the questions as they come in. So getting some good questions so far, but if you do have other questions, please use the Q&A function. So Shelley, I think Michelle just touched on this a moment ago, but we've seen in your presentation there were some sort of fun comments or fun content that we've used. I was particularly fond of more people believe in aliens than those who have donated plasma. Let's try to turn that number around. But other than those sort of like fun and interesting things that sort of draw people's attention, what is the role of patient and donor stories? What do we see when we use patient stories in particular?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, again, I love going back to those focus groups. They're such a great investment because you get just so much good stuff out of them when you're, putting creative in front of people and hearing what they have to say about it, because they always talk about it way beyond what, you're asking them to, which is great. You always want to hear all of that wonderful feedback. One of the biggest things that we heard over and over again was just that they didn't understand what plasma was used for. And I think, a key part to actually getting people to go in and consider donating and then ultimately doing it is, well, I need to understand what the value of that donation is going to be. So if I'm giving my time and kind of like going out of my way to try this, then I really want to know that it's going to pay off. And I think, like Michelle talked about, blood for years during sort of like the mid to late 80s, really spent a lot of time elevating awareness of the need, right? The ultimate, like, that your blood, when you donate blood, is going to save somebody on the operating table or, whatever. So that's what we're trying to really do in the case of plasma. Patient stories are so incredibly helpful because they really put a face to what oftentimes are a little bit long, a little bit undiscernible or understandable disease names. Unfortunate truth of the matter, right? So, or there's a lot of acronyms out there that just people are like, what? That's 4 letters. How do I, what? How's plasma? What does plasma have to do with that? And why do I care? And so, the other side of that is the idea of talking about rare and chronic. Sometimes people tune out of it. Well, rare, that doesn't really affect me. I'm never going to know anyone. But when we can actually get those stories and what people are going through and the symptoms and the way plasma has changed their lives, in front of people, that's when they finally realize, right? The light bulb goes off. Oh my gosh, that poor girl was almost paralyzed. And then what? Plasma? She can walk again? Okay, now I get it. Right. So that is just such an important part of broadcasting the need and the impact, because what we don't want to do is put need, go fill it. No, we want to show the impact as well, right? That difference that plasma has made or plasma therapies have made in people's lives. Really, really important to breaking through and getting people to truly take action.
That's all very helpful. And from PPTA's perspective, we've often focused on the need for plasma-derived therapies for people with rare diseases, to your point. But we've seen, and through our conversations, that people are also very, very positively responsive to messages about the uses of plasma for non-rare disease purposes. So for trauma, for surgery, for these emergency medical needs. So that I don't know anybody with primary immune deficiency, but I know a friend of mine who was in a car accident and they were shipped to the emergency room, or my parent had a lung transplant. So clearly these are ways that therapies derived from plasma are used to make it more ubiquitous, that while you don't have or may not know somebody with a disease, chances are you know somebody who either has had or will need some kind of therapy derived from plasma in the past. I just want to touch real quick. We got a question, there's a short-term risk to donations. What can be done to increase staffing at donation centers, hiring associates, it's difficult, et cetera. I think that's part of the challenge that PPTA faces as a trade association, and our messages. We straddle the line between awareness and information building and information sharing about the need for plasma therapies, the patients, the donors. But there is a clear line of what is the association's lane, for lack of a better word, versus what our members are doing in their community. So I think that would be a question that I think our member companies and those who operate donation centers in communities around the country would be better suited to answer, since that's a specific business practice. So I think, there's a question about what social media platforms are you using, which ties into a question that I wanted to ask Parker real quick. You said that, or I think we've seen, and you overtly said that this is a digital campaign with a big focus on social media, paid digital advertising. Why are we focusing on digital? So why Facebook and Instagram?
Yeah, so we are actually using 4 channels right now: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, running content across those 4 social channels. And the answer to why we're doing social and digital here is pretty straightforward. It's a couple of points. It's the ability to test this great creative and messaging quickly, get it out there to the audiences. On the flip side of that coin, to be able to control which audiences we were actually reaching and refine which audiences we are reaching, which is why that click-through rate and the video completion rate, because we're reaching qualified donors online and in social. This ability to engage in particular, this like two-way dialogue with the comments of people are showing intent and showing consideration, going beyond that reach and awareness. And so we're actually able on social to reach out to them and say, hey, go to the website. Here's where you find this information. To your point, Matt, we're in information. So you have your websites that are providing this information, but then social and digital becomes these extension, these satellite channels of this information and this ability to make sure that it is reaching the people that are interested in it. And, and then the fourth main point on social and digital in particular is just quick optimizations. We're able to kind of like see what is working, what isn't working, and throw in new tests. We showed the timeline. It said there was a campaign refresh. A refresh is a lot of creative turning over at one time, but during the course of this campaign, we're also doing mini refreshes along the way to see what is working. So social and digital just allowed us to really ramp up very quickly, test very quickly, and also the metrics that came in while we were looking at some kind of core metrics, CPM, making sure that the reach and awareness was very cost effective and that we were reaching the right people. We're actually able to cycle in new metrics that are helping us to tell a story about how effective this campaign is heading into 2022.
Perfect. And just real quick, for those who may not know, you made a couple references to CPM. What is CPM?
CPM, sorry, I throw out a lot of acronyms. CPM is cost per thousand. So that's an indicator in digital marketing that says this is how much it costs to reach 1,000 people. So on the slide I showed, it was at $3.20, which is a great CPM. So we're spending $3.20 across these social channels to reach every 1,000 people. And the more qualified those people are, the lower your CPM is, and the more those people click through to the site. So it starts to really benefit as you reach those more qualified leads.
So it's a sign of the cost effectiveness. So the lower the CPM, the more effective we are in reaching basically the right people, or the people that we are most desirable of, or desiring of reaching. So excellent.
Yeah, exactly.
So just real quick, there was another question, and then I'll toss one over to Michelle. Somebody asked if there are any pilot projects planned outside the U.S. to raise awareness globally, and so this is Defy the Odds is obviously a U.S.-based campaign. Right now, we're focused on Florida, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, and Texas. And just for context, we chose those 5 states because those are the 5 states that house the largest number of donation centers nationwide. Quite simply, there's a plurality of donation centers in the US are in those 5 states. So let's work on the regions where the donation centers are. We know that there is a lot to do in the EU as well. And we're certainly aware that we do need to do more in the EU at a minimum to raise awareness. the difference is in the US, we're working to raise awareness amongst the general public to get them cognizant of, aware of, and informed about plasma donation, to get them into a donation center. In the EU, our charge is a little bit different because we're really looking at policymakers. We need to change the regulatory and policy landscape to allow more donation centers to open, to really focus on increasing opportunities for people to donate. So we do know that there is work to do in the EU, and we will be doing it, where we will take some of the findings of lessons learned from this campaign as we look at the EU and globally moving forward. So Michelle, I know we're running low on time, but I did an interesting question came in. What importance did focus group participants place on the compensation component?
Oh, that's a great question. So interestingly enough, it was not a primary driver. It was really one of those things where once they understood the uses that Shelley actually pointed out to plasma, it was sort of a game changer in the conversation and their likelihood to donate. While I think compensation, I don't think anybody's going to say no to compensation, it wasn't a primary driver. It really was understanding like, wait, wow, there's so many uses and it really can be life-saving and transformative. That became the primary focus of our focus group conversations. And interestingly enough, they all built on each other. You can only go on what a focus group member shares with you. But what we saw was really an education. There were a few people in our focus groups that had either donated or had experience around a donation, either exposed through a loved one or what have you. But by and large, we are talking about focus groups with folks that had never donated before, so had very limited understanding, which is reflective of our national population. So not a primary driver. I think it's a nice incentive, but it wasn't a primary driver, which is really informative for us because it shows that moving beyond the current donor profile was something we should focus our energy and campaign efforts on to grow the overall base over time.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And I think part of what I've been impressed by is people on Facebook and Instagram, just the general social media users, who, when they see some of the content, how many people then engage and say, oh, I was in the same boat, or I received this treatment when I was pregnant as well. God bless plasma donors. Everybody should donate. So those messages that really focus on the impact and the what and the how, and that emotional connection is definitely very, very helpful. So I am cognizant that we are up against the end of our session. This has been a great conversation. I do want to take a moment just to thank Michelle and Shelley and Parker and the rest of the team at MWW. We've been working very closely for, like I said, more than a year, and I don't think there's been a single day in that past year that I've not been on the phone with, or a text with, or chat with, or email with somebody, if not more than one person from MWW. So I really do value the partnership and the teamwork that we've established, and look forward to future work. So thank you all very much. Before I turn the camera off or go off stage or whatever we're doing in this world, I do want to make sure that everybody knows, okay, immediately following this session, we do have a scheduled networking break. So I would encourage everybody to use that time to join a breakout room, visit the sponsor page, connect one-on-one with another GPS attendee, and please do enjoy the rest of the GPS. I think after this networking break, the next session is focused more on what are other organizations doing from the patient perspective and elsewhere to raise awareness. So another conversation about raising awareness about the need for plasma donation from different perspectives is coming up after the networking break. So thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of your time. Thank you.